This is a coalition government. That's exactly what this is right now. And let's geek out a little bit, shall we, on House procedure, if that's okay.
Yes.
This is kind of
yes.
geek, right? Rules are supposed to pass on party lines. And when the Speaker's committee, and the Rules Committee is the Speaker's committee, the Speaker puts all the Republicans on that particular committee. When that committee cannot pass a rule out, and you have to rely on the Democrats, then you are now in a coalition government. You're now passing stuff that is acceptable to a majority of both Republicans and Democrats, a coalition-style government. Keep in mind what a rule is. Because of the arcane way that the House of Representatives works, there aren't really any rules until you set a rule for every single piece of legislation. That rule includes when it will be debated, how long it will be debated, who gets to speak and for how long, which amendments will be in order or allowed to be debated and voted on, et cetera. Without that, you have to do what you guys mentioned in the intro, which is do a suspension of the rules, which is essentially just bring something down and see if 2/3 of the people support it. If so, it passes. This is, again, a bizarre way to do business, but it's the way the House has worked for generations. When the Republicans need the Democrats, or vice versa, to pass a rule, which is what you have to bring a bill to the floor where it can pass with a simple majority, you have a coalition government. And that's what's functioning right now in the House.
Well, that's remarkable. I thought you were going to say, come on, guys, give them a break. This isn't a formal power sharing agreement. But we read you, Mick, and I guess I'm just wondering what happens next then. If this is, in fact, a coalition-style government, whatever we're going to call it, that would also protect him from being fired, right?
Well, that's the test, right? I mean, I don't know if you all saw what Kevin McCarthy said. I can't remember what the outlet was last week. He said he thought that he had an understanding from the Democrats that they would come to his aid. Right. Which is why he said reach out, because he didn't want to spoil his relationship with his own party. And it might be that Mike has something formal, something informal. It might be Mike thinks they're coming to his aid, but we won't really know until the vote happens. And that's why, let's get to the interesting stuff, right? The vote to vacate the chair is a privileged motion. So anybody, now that it's been filed and it's ripened, it's sat in the hopper for X number of days, it can be brought up at any time by anyone. And once it is, it stops all other activity. So if Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey are sincere about trying to stop what's happening on the floor, they could, in theory, not in theory, they could actually bring the motion now and bring the House to a halt, at least temporarily while they vote, or semi-permanently if it passes until they hire a new speaker.
Well, Mick, I think it's interesting that some of those who cast a vote to oust Kevin McCarthy last fall are suggesting that they would not do so again this time because they have serious concerns. Either it's going to hurt the Republicans electorally come November, or because there's a real chance that Hakeem Jeffries could end up the House Speaker. What's different now that wasn't true when we were dealing with Kevin McCarthy inside the Republican Party, including the House Freedom Caucus? Bob Good does not seem to want to go along with us. Can you just try to take us inside that room and work through what you think they might be thinking?
Yeah, I think some of the folks are starting to realize what poor decision-making they may have made when they removed Kevin McCarthy. They sort of brought this stain on the reputation of the Republican Party and didn't get better policies out of it anyway. So I think they're scratching their heads going, maybe all those people like Mulvaney who are saying this is a stupid move might have been right. By the way, one of my favorite sayings is that the biggest lie in Washington, D.C. is, I hate to say I told you so. Everybody loves saying I told you so in Washington, D.C. But I think a lot of folks are starting to realize that. I wouldn't diminish the role of Donald Trump here. I don't think Donald Trump, and that's the reason you saw him with Mike Johnson this week, or last week, I guess I lose track of time, was because he doesn't want this distraction. Okay, he wants the negative focus that's on Biden now about the economy and Biden's inability to navigate what's happening in the Middle East. And he wants the attention on his trials, which he is using now to his political gain. If the Republicans replace a speaker or move to replace a speaker, that goes to the top of the media list and it kicks him down one, maybe two notches. And he doesn't like that. So I think it's a combination of things. But keep in mind, and we had this conversation, Kailey, with John Boehner the day before he retired. He called a bunch of us into a room and said, or I think it was 6 or 8 of us, and said, are y'all going to bring the motion to vacate? And because it had been sitting there sort of like it is now for Mike Johnson. And we said, Mr. Speaker, no, we won't. We'll give you our word on that. But if anybody else does, we are going to vote to vacate the chair. And that's the question right now is, are those folks out there who are saying, I don't want to change the speaker. Let's not change the speaker. Now it's bad for the party, et cetera. If the vote actually comes down, will they vote to keep Mike Johnson in there, or will they vote to vote him out?
Well, it's really something as your former House Freedom Caucus weighs in on this. To Kailey's point, they met last evening and decided that this motion to vacate was a bad idea. Mick, is it about the devil you know? The Freedom Caucus doesn't want a Steve Scalise or a Tom Emmer to replace Mike Johnson or, God forbid, in their view, a Hakeem Jeffries, right?
I don't think the Hakeem Jeffries' possibility is for real, but there might be a compromised person. But I think the bottom line is this, is that I think they've now realized that the things they didn't like about what was happening under Kevin McCarthy's speakership was not because of Kevin McCarthy. It was because they have a 3 or 4 or 5 vote margin, period. That's it. And replacing Mike Johnson with any other Republican is not going to change any outcomes at this point. Nobody who they can imagine in their wildest dreams. Keep in mind, Mike Johnson was praised by the right wing when he took over as speaker. He was their win. I remember the right wing groups claiming that this is what it was all about. It was worth it to get rid of McCarthy because look at the great conservative and things are going to be different now. And yay team, and we were right. And now they're sort of looking their hands over and go, well, maybe it wasn't a personality driven thing or an individual driven thing. Maybe it was systemic. And I think that's correct. This is what you get when your majority is only 4 or 5 people. And I think now some of them are starting to realize that.